1995, a billionaire's plane vanishes off the Pacific. Larry Hillblum, the H in DHL. Body never found, with no wife, no kids, no heir. His billion-dollar empire was up for grabs. And then dozens of women walk in the courtrooms all across Asia, Vietnam, the Philippines, all holding babies saying the same thing. Larry Hillblum was the father, and that billion-dollar fortune, well, it belongs to a toddler on a Vietnamese rice paddy farm. But when lawyers started digging into Larry's life on this tiny island of Saipan, well, they found out DHL wasn't the only thing he had built. They uncover a trafficking empire so disturbing that DHL has spent decades trying to bury it. This is the story of Larry Hillblum, the billionaire without a boss. A quick word from our sponsor. Now, my grandpa passed away last month, and the story of how he said he got here was always very vague. He came over here on a coyote through the border, but as far as his actual parents, where he was ever from, he never knew his entire life. So when he passed, it kind of made us all think, where exactly was Grandpa ever from? So I partnered with MyHeritage to find out. Simple cheek swab, 2 minutes, you ship it right off. Now, I figured it would come back like 90% Mexican, nothing crazy. Hey Mom, remember that DNA test that I did?
Yeah, what happened?
We're not even that Mexican. We're actually Spanish and we're French. How crazy is that?
What? Are you sure? Well,
there we go.
That kind of does make sense.
Now, this part was cool. So, MyHeritage, they actually found DNA matches of people I'm potentially related to that I've never even met. And for our family who's really got no records of any of this, that's everything. They've also got this ancient origins feature, so it traces your DNA back thousands of years to actual ancient populations. Ours? We're European farmers. Yeah, the family group chat's been pretty lit up ever since we found out where we were from. Grandpa, he was from Chihuahua, Mexico. So normally MyHeritage is $89. But I told them all about my story, how we found out all about our family, and they did a one-time deal for this video. So code Vincent, it is $19 for the DNA kit. You get free shipping, 30-day free trial, and the best part, MyHeritage is committed to never selling or licensing your genetic data. So your DNA, it's always going to be yours. So links in the description, code Vincent, you get the DNA kit, you get free shipping, 30-day free trial, $19. But before the island and before the girls, Larry Hillblum is just a broke college kid. So how did he become a billionaire? Well, it all starts in 1969. Now, we land on the moon, the internet's being born, and the cargo container is invented. Now, stay with me here.
This cargo is going into a steel container called a cargo van.
And the cargo container changes the whole game. Now, before this, shipping was absolute chaos. You had different size crates, you have bags, half of it gets stolen, and then someone said in 1969, why don't we just make them all the same damn size? Bam. Ships carry 3 times as much, cost drop by 90%. But the cargo container created another huge problem. See, to claim your cargo, you need a thing called a bill of landing. It's like a proof of ownership. And you would think that paper would come on the boat, but the post office mails it. So now you got this problem. Millions of dollars in cargo sitting at the port for weeks, all waiting on the damn mailman. Now, Larry's fresh out of Berkeley Law, and he sees this cluster. And he thinks, well, people fly from San Fran to Honolulu every day. They probably aren't using their full luggage allowance. Why don't we buy plane tickets and give out free round-trip tickets to Hawaii? And the only catch is you gotta carry a duffel bag full of documents in your bag. Free trip to Hawaii? Hell yeah, people sign up. You have waiters, secretaries, teachers flying overnight with bills of landing stuffed in their bags. And this is how DHL starts. Now, the D and the L are 2 other guys that drop out, but regardless, DHL blew up fast. Now, the whole business model was that couriers would hand carry documents on commercial flights for things that were worth their weight in gold. Like medical records, letters of credit, stuff like that. Now, this was a time where the post office took 3 weeks to ship something. So then going to Larry's version of overnight international shipping, it was insane at the time.
With more offices in more countries, DHL delivers documents faster worldwide than anyone. DHL delivers when you want it, where you want it, worldwide.
They would have to do free trials for companies just to even prove it could be done. And once you go overnight, you really can't go back. You're hooked. Bank of America signs on. You have Standard Oil, the Federal Reserve. And with all of the manufacturing in the Pacific, DHL blows up. Now, they grow at 1,200% a year. And pound for pound, this is one of the fastest startups of its day. And this is all with Larry and a bunch of random people hauling duffel bags full of million-dollar documents on regular commercial flights. But you know, every time someone rises up in this world, there's always going to be some asshole trying to drag them down. And the post office, they saw DHL as a huge threat. See, it's enshrined in the Constitution that the government can only deliver mail. The Constitution. So when Larry starts flying documents overnight, the post office says, hell no, homie, that is mail. And they come after him so hard with lawsuits. Now, Larry's whole argument distilled down is that this isn't mail, this is like organ donor paperwork, blueprint stuff where if you wait a week, it costs thousands of dollars and could even cost lives. So after a whole decade-long court battle, DHL takes down the 200-year-old postal monopoly. And this opens the market for everyone else to exist. And this is years before FedEx. And by the 1980s, DHL was operating in 120 countries. And Larry Hillblum, this man you've probably never heard of, is one of the richest men in America. But this isn't a story about DHL, it's about Larry Hillblum. But after winning this David versus Goliath battle with the feds, Larry grew a bit bored. Chases weird side projects, hotels in Vietnam, golf courses in Micronesia. And that's when the rumors started about Larry's hobbies, going skiing in the Middle East, with the sheiks and women of the night. The kind of stuff where even his own partners were like, dude, what the hell are you doing? But when Larry gets in a near-death motorcycle crash, that's when the partners decide, yeah, they can't have the face of the company doing this. So Larry Hillblum is forced out of DHL. He still keeps his share, he still gets paid, he's just out of the company. And that's when he becomes the most dangerous version of himself. A billionaire with no boss. Now Larry searches for a place where nobody could tell him no. A place so remote, most people couldn't even point to it on a map. He finds Saipan. This is a US territory known for its brothels, casinos, and its tax rebate. You see, on Saipan, whatever you pay in taxes, you get 95% of it back. It's basically a tax haven with an American flag on it. And to Larry, he hated the IRS. This was perfect. It was so remote, he could avoid the tabloids and engage in whatever sketchy behavior he wanted to. Now, showing up like the savior of the island, he promises he'll make it the Bahamas of Asia, hotels and casinos, but Saipan had been burned badly before.
Saipan has cultivated some powerful friends back in Washington. Congressman Tom DeLay of Houston, the third-ranking Republican in the House, went as a guest of the Saipan government over the Christmas holiday, a trip that included a tour of several factories and barracks, with one that even Congressman DeLay had to concede was nothing to write home about.
Now, anything made in Saipan is made in the USA. It's a US territory. But Saipan doesn't follow US labor laws. So in the 90s, you had Gap, Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, all manufacturing American-made clothes there, except all of the workers, they were brought in from Bangladesh. They lived in barracks, had their passports confiscated, all paid pennies. Essentially, it was slave labor with a made in the USA tag. So yeah, the Islanders really don't trust this billionaire guy at first, but Larry tells him he's different. He's wearing cool Hawaiian shirts, he's got flip-flops. As a billionaire, he's just like us. Reminds me of the Andrew CEO a little bit. But this whole ruse works. They let him in. And once Larry's in, oh boy, he starts buying up the whole place. Now Larry doesn't invest in Saipan, he buys the control knobs of society. First, he purchases the Bank of Saipan, because Larry didn't want the FDIC in the country, which basically meant Larry had his own bank, to write his own lines of credit, to then purchase more businesses. Next, he purchases the island's largest newspaper, the Saipan Tribune. Where it's Larry's narrative every day, it's the greatest thing ever Larry's done, he's saving the island. Then he takes over the cable TV stations, does the same thing, and uses it as a platform to defend himself from ongoing lawsuits. I actually found this broadcast of his attorney speaking for him right here.
I think that Mr. Mitchell has a personal vendetta against Mr. Hillblum, and I don't know what has triggered his animosity towards Mr. Hillblum.
Attorney Bruce Jorgensen says that Noni's attorney Ted Mitchell was triggered to file this lawsuit due to his alleged personal hatred towards Hillblum.
But here's how paranoid he really was at this time. He builds his own telecom network all across the island.
IT&E has the lowest long-distance rates on Saipan.
Because he thinks, well, the FBI's tapping in on his phone. And it turns out, they actually were. But owning businesses is never enough. With his own TV network, Larry had become the most influential legislator in all of Micronesia.
Something that isn't increasing is the movement to repeal Saipan's recently enacted zoning law.
You know, helping politicians win races, getting laws passed, and as a token of gratitude, the governor appoints him as a special Supreme Court judge, a billionaire. Now, on a small island like this, judges are absent all the time. So when a seat's empty, the special judge, aka Larry, steps in. And the first thing Larry does is, well, he rewrites the island's banking laws. But this is insane. Now, the IRS had come to Saipan to try to audit Larry. They wanted his tax returns. Larry's mortal enemy was the IRS. He hated them. So Larry files a lawsuit on behalf of the citizens of Saipan. The case goes to the Supreme Court and, oh, the judge is missing that day. Larry fills in, and he renders a verdict in his own lawsuit. A billionaire in a Supreme Court seat? Yeah, you want to talk about power, that's it right there. Now, most locals, they don't really see Larry as this boogeyman cartoon villain. They really see him as like a dorky, weeaboo white guy because honestly, Larry really played the part. Even though he had a brand new DeLorean gifted by the Saudis, he daily drove a beat-up Honda Civic. He didn't look rich. Hell, some locals even refused to believe Larry's whole DHL story, instead believing that he was part of the CIA, with how many businesses he owned on the island. Because fed or not, within a decade, Larry had owned over 50 businesses on the island. He had taken over Air Micronesia, the only airline with 20 Boeing jets. He opens up pawn shops like Starbucks, high interest loans on the poor, apartment buildings, homes, casinos, hotels, and even Saipan's own amusement park. Cowtown, an amusement park with the rodeo show with cowboys brought in from Idaho, with a golf range, and even the Cowtown brothel. Larry is a sitting Supreme Court judge and also running brothels on the island as well. Now, while most locals jokingly call him King Larry, most nights you would find him bartending at his own restaurant, dancing, to his favorite song, the banger, Every Breath You Take. And Larry's pouring out drinks like he's a normal guy, but the reality is Larry just isn't rich in Saipan. The guy was practically untouchable. The whole island depended on him. And then, his plane vanishes off the earth. After searching for 11 days, the Coast Guard finds wreckage of the plane and the bodies on board, except for Larry Hillblum. Declared dead, lost at sea, his body would never be found again. Now, conspiracies start to circulate about Larry maybe faking his own death and starting a new life to evade the IRS. It was rumored he had a big IRS lawsuit coming up against him. You see, 2 years earlier, Larry had a nasty plane crash.
After a frightening accident, all is well for businessman and CNMI Special Judge Larry Hillblum. Hillblum and 2 passengers were testing a new engine. The group was en route from Tinian to Saipan when the single-engine Cessna flipped shortly after takeoff and slammed into an ironwood tree. Hillblum suffered broken ribs, hands, and facial bones. He'll be undergoing facial surgery in San Francisco before the week's end.
And he somehow survived. I mean, look at those pictures. Like, how could you absolutely survive this? So people just couldn't believe that he actually was gone. But regardless, without a body, Saipan goes into a freakout, and DHL is panicking. With no wife, no kids, no successor, who was gonna take his $800 million fortune over? Now, DHL discovers a will that he had written in 1982. Shoddily written, but ice cold. Now, Larry's mother was to get absolutely nothing, not just nothing, written to get absolutely nothing, referring to her as the bitch. His 2 brothers, they would get $300,000 each, because anymore, well, the IRS taxes it. And the rest of his $800 million fortune, well, it would go to the University of California healthcare system, because it would be tax-free. Now, DHL would get to buy back the shares, everyone's happy, except for his mom, for about 5 minutes. A woman named Kaylani Kinney walks into a lawyer's office holding the hand of an 11-year-old boy. She says Larry Hillblum is the father.
You are the father!
And that whole $1 billion fortune, it belongs to him. This kid's legal name on his birth certificate? Larry Hillblum Jr. She spelled Hillblum the best she could because Kaylani, she couldn't read. Now, she tells them that she had met Larry at a club in Palau, she had spent 3 nights at his hotel that he owned, and had his baby in 1984. And the kid even tells the attorney his grandma hung a picture of Larry on the wall to remind him of where he came from. But Kehlani just didn't show up after Larry died. Years earlier, she had tracked him down at his golf course, showed him his son, said that she just needed a little bit of support. Larry calls the police, gets her arrested on the spot, and then turns his back to the DHL guys he's golfing with and says, "This is some crazy lady just trying to get my money. I have no idea who she is." But what really convinced this attorney to take this thing on? This kid was a spitting image of Larry Hillblum. To DHL, this was physically impossible. Larry had bragged to executives, it was even in sworn affidavits, that he had had a vasectomy. So the estate, they brushed these women off, but legally, this girl had a shot. Because Larry Hillblum, the attorney who rewrote banking laws, beat the US Postal Service, sat on the goddamn Supreme Court.
All is well for businessman and CNMI Special Judge Larry Hillblum.
Forgot to write 2 sentences in his will that would have changed this entire story. A disinheritance clause, a no kids get anything line.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
And without those 2 sentences, the estate had opened itself up to any biological child making a claim on this billion-dollar estate. The only question was, how many biological kids were there? Turns out, there was quite a lot. For DHL, their worst nightmare was unfolding. A child from a Micronesian rice paddy farm was going to become the largest shareholder in their billion-dollar company. And then DHL realizes a silver lining to all of this. A positive. Larry's body was never found. So DHL, they go in the crisis mode. They scrub his mansion with 55-gallon drums of muriatic acid. They bring in plumbers to clear out all of the pipes of any hair residue or anything that could be tested. Now, when investigators arrived from the court, they said it looked like no one had even lived there. But DHL don't leave it to chance. The estate convinces the governor of Saipan, who Larry had built very much goodwill with, to sign an emergency act, the Hillblum Bill. This would ban DNA from being used for paternity and prevent unacknowledged children from getting an inheritance. And by changing the rules of the game, people wanted to know, why was the estate panicking so much? What exactly were they trying to hide? Now in Saipan, local attorneys, they smell blood in the water, the fattest commission in their lives. So they start putting up posters in red light districts all across Micronesia. Larry's face plastered all on them. Have you had a baby with this man? And women show up from all across the Pacific, Vietnam, Philippines, all saying the same thing. Larry had left them with the child. And one of them is 14-year-old Mercida Feliciano. This story comes from her sworn affidavit. Now, several clubs had turned down Mercida because she looked too young, but eventually her parents had sold her into a Manila club to pay off family debts. One night, Larry's in the club, he sees her, is infatuated. He pays the mama-san, basically the madame running the club, to have Mercida examined by a doctor. He wants confirmation that she has a cherry. Now, he offers her $700 for the night, but she refuses, because it's up to her mom to negotiate the cherry fee. Larry, like I said, is infatuated, so he pivots. He tracks down her family, pays for an optometrist to treat her blind sister. And that night, he hands the mother $1,000, and the mother says yes. And this was on the promise that Larry, at 52 years old, would marry Mercida. He never did. Now this is when DHL discovers Larry's hobby, scouring across the Far East for incredibly young girls. Now most of them are just broke teenagers who had been sold into this by their parents, where Larry, a billionaire, haggled over the price of them. In Larry's demented head, he had a reason for this. He was a hypochondriac, and when the AIDS crisis hit in the 80s and 90s, he freaked out. And his solution, which I think really shows just how out of reality the guy was to only sleep with pure girls. So he builds an entire system, just like with DHL, to support this. He pays finders to locate girls across Micronesia. He pays mothers and madams to call him after their daughter's first period, and then Larry would fly then. He would call them cherry girls, and he would brag about this openly to his friends. He would say he spent about over $10 million doing this, stating that he deflowered 132 girls. He was proud of it. But with everything against him, why would these women even try to come forward? Well, because these stories were so disturbing that they could probably get at least a settlement out of the estate. But to bolster all of their cases, they just needed to prove that these were Larry's kids. But by now, Larry's family had refused any subpoena for DNA. So the lawyers start hunting for anything to prove their case. They hear about a surgery Larry had in 1993. This was after the first plane crash. And the hospital had preserved a sample, a mole taken from his face. So the hospital hands the mole over, and it's the final piece to prove the whole story, and it's someone else's mole. Now the hospital calls it a labeling mistake, but here's the part that's insane. That same hospital stands to inherit Larry's $1 billion will. But there was one thing that everyone forgot to account for. Larry's mom. She was pissed that she didn't even get a dime out of this $1 billion estate. So she makes a deal with the kid's lawyers. She'll give him her DNA to prove paternity at the price of $1 million cash and Larry's French chalet. All, of course, paid out of the kid's settlement. One last middle finger from mother to son. The DNA proves it. 4 kids, same dad. But DHL would still not settle. But when the headline started, $1 billion company fights children of dead pedophiles, yeah, I'm gonna be honest, it's really not a good look. But when Johnny Cochran takes the case, fresh off of the OJ trial, arguably the most famous attorney in America, he flies in the Saipan to represent the kids, to get them their just payday. And now it isn't just really bad headlines, the whole thing's a media circus. Cameras everywhere, Cochran in all the pictures, and DHL blinks. They finally settle. Because the PR war, it was just unwinnable. There was no way of winning that. Between taxes and attorneys, the estate had shrunk down to about $650 million. So in a 60-40 split, the UC system received $240 million, the largest donation in their history. The confirmed children, they split about $300 million. Now the kids also set up an insurance policy if more children came forward for $30 million. And that insurance policy is still paying out to this day. But now proving Larry Hillblum was his dad meant Hill Broom Jr. would now become an American citizen. So his family moves out to Idaho, they put him into a good boarding school. But at 18, when he acquires access to his $90 million, he turns into a degenerate.
Hillbroom allegedly bought a total of 108 pounds of. He traveled over 25 times along with co-conspirators to and from Palau and Guam, where he would sell the 108 pounds of meth for $24.5 million. Hillbroom is scheduled to be sentenced in the U.S. District Court of Idaho.
Where today he is currently serving an 8-year sentence. Now, according to the court records of the recent case in 2022, he is now down to his last $15 million. But how did California use Larry's cash? Well, they put it at UCLA and the Geffen Medical Center, where inside there's the Larry Hillblum Eyelid Research Center. Now on their website it says they're working for a research and cure for diabetes, but what I couldn't find on any website or any archive online is a dang picture of this place. Now I thought maybe they took down the name because of all of the stuff that's come out about Larry, but I thought, why not go up there myself and try to find it? So I made the day trip up to LA, paid for overpriced parking, got into the building pretending to be a medical student, and there it was, the Larry Hillblum Eyelid Research Center, something that has never been photographed before until now. Maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, but I seriously could not find a picture of this place. Now, I'm not trying to take away from the scientists or the money going to a good cause, but I'm gonna be honest, the name is a little insane, because after everything we talked about, I mean, this is all that's left of this guy. Now, I couldn't find any statement the foundation has actually made about Larry's crimes. All they say is that he just wanted to help children all around the world because Larry had such an open heart. He was a respected businessman. They just want us to forget who Larry actually was. Because right now, most people walk by that name Hillblum and they have no idea who it is. They don't feel anything. But now you do. So the next time you see a DHL truck, you'll know what the H stands for. Most people won't. Thank you to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Use code Vincent to get your DNA test kit for $19 using the link in the description.